Welcome to the Wellness Woman podcast. This podcast marks season 2, or a combination and rebranding of The Green Life, an evolution into a more expansive conversation around women's health, holistic well-being, and conscious living for everyone. Hosted by me, Chantal, holistic nutritionist and naturopath. The podcast offers real-life conversations, practical tools, and grounded insights to help you navigate wellness with clarity, without overwhelm, extreme, or confusion. This is where wellness meets real life. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 123 of The Wellness Woman, the new rebranding of The Green Life. I am very excited to be here because with this new chapter, this new season, and new brand, I feel like we can bring together so much wellness information, but also we can talk about so many different subjects that I hope will help the listeners, whether we are going through family issues and we want to heal emotionally, relationships in general, or even with our chosen loved ones, with our pets, with life in general. If we want to have a homestead, everything that was packed in The Green Life is still here, so we will continue with those conversations. But now we're also bringing in cycles wellness information. So we're going to talk about women wellness as we progress through our menopausal, premenopausal to postmenopausal years, but also how we can serve ourselves. So it's going to be a blend of all, because I wanted really everybody to be accessing this information without feeling that the Cycle Wellness podcast was going to be just for women of that age, and rather actually have a podcast where anybody can, if they want, learn a little bit more, especially if you're younger and you want to really understand how our bodies work. I think it's really important to do that. So I am starting this new chapter with a wonderful guest, my friend Brenda Davis. If you are plant-based, you know exactly who she is. Registered dietitian from Canada, responsible for authoring so many books, including authoring the guidelines for nutrition for the Canadian government. So the plate in Canada is all about bringing in more plants as per science guidelines, and it's really been designed with the information in mind, without any input from industry. And that is one of the best examples of guidelines that we have when it comes to nutrition for any government. So very excited that she was asked, right, with her partner in writing, with Santo Melina, and they both actually writing a new book as well. So I don't want to spill too many beans here, but yes. So anyway, today we're going to talk about women wellness. We're going to talk about our transitions between perimenopause to postmenopause and how to support our bodies nutritionally and with anything that we might need to do in our lifestyles. And Brenda, being in her menopausal years or postmenopausal years, she can share her experience as I shared mine with perimenopause, and also my struggles in my 30s, which I'm not having now in my 40s because I changed my lifestyle. So it's really interesting to go through this information, because as women we can feel quite lonely and not served by the medical system. There's a lot of conflicting information online, and I hope that I can have actually some amazing doctors online here to also speak about HRT. I would love to actually do even a big panel with some contrasting and conflicting information from doctors, so that we can talk about it and clarify, because there's always two camps, and when you're sharing with the choir, then of course nobody's challenging you. But like if we are in an environment on like a round table kind of setting where we can discuss what we don't agree on, I think it just offers more clarity for the public. So let's see if I can pull that off with some amazing names, because it would be awesome. Okay, so as we get into this wonderful episode, I want to just give a big shout out to my affiliates. So NamaWell, of course, the juicer that I love to the moon and back. I've been using it since 2021 and hasn't failed me ever. I still make my juices in batch. I prepare them 5 days in advance, even 6 sometimes. It lasts super well. You have to, of course, jar them properly. And then, honestly, it's worth every penny. It's such a beautiful, sturdy machine. Works incredibly well. It's really fast for a masticator. And yeah, I highly suggest it. So if you want it for 10% off, I have my discount code in the notes. I was also approached by a company called Froya Organics, which is a skincare company. And I was a bit skeptical, but I tried their products for aging skin, for mature skin. And I must admit, I really like them. They are made only with botanicals. They are not water-based, so they're very rich, and they stay on the skin and hydrate really well. So I really highly recommend them if you're looking for a clean product that doesn't have any carcinogenic ingredients or anything that is hormonal disrupting. Like, it's really a good brand. It's a little bit pricey, but I've looked online at other companies that also have these kind of products, and actually is in line, if not cheaper than some of the other brands. So it could be something you can consider. I will put all the information about the discount codes in the show notes as well. I also want to plug in Newzest, which is one of the companies that I've been working with for the longest time. You guys know I only really plug in people I work with and like. Newzest is a company that creates some protein powders, as well as my favorite one that I always share with everybody, if anything, is the Good Green Vitality. It is a green powder, but actually it really is a supplement. It's got everything from food, and it's been created because the daughter of the founder of the company has MS and has been living with it for a long time, and she thrives. She goes to the gym, she moves well. They told her she couldn't even have children, and she has. So she's really testament that looking after yourself works. Now, she does take medication, but she supports herself with the Good Green Vitality and the other products from the line, because she was taking basically everything separately, and I know how that feels. And Good Green Vitality was the product that they created so that she could just have one scoop of everything in one go at the right amounts. And I really love taking it. I love the taste, so I highly recommend it. You can get 15% evergreen in the show notes. And sometimes we run some really cool discounts, and I think at the moment you might find one for 20% for the rest of January. All right, guys, the last one I want to plug in is the Lumen. So Lumen is a metabolic flexibility tracker. Basically, you breathe into it, and it will tell you how you are doing with your burning of carbohydrates or fats. So it really just helps you understand how you're processing your food. If some of the carbs you're eating maybe take a little bit longer for you to get into fat burn, you'll just learn these things. You learn how you react to your workouts. You learn a lot of things. Now, it's not straightforward, it's not black and white, but I find it very helpful. And it took me a while to actually understand how my body was working. It's really not black and white, I repeat that. But I find it super intelligent. And I think in comparison to other biohacking solutions, this is educational and it's not invasive. And I think as women, especially as we change in our hormones and whether we're going through our cycle or not, this has actually helped me in understand how we react to our food through our cycle. Sometimes you just can't get into fat burn. Your body wants to stay into carb burn, and that especially happens through the luteal phase, just before your cycle. So it's really interesting. It actually also showed me how I react to stress. If I'm really stressed, my glucose level will go up. So I should say not that really. I should say I'm burning more carbohydrates just to support my body with more energy. So it's been really interesting journey. So if you want to check it out, I'll leave also the details in the show notes. Then, of course, Wonder Workshop. If you want to get amazing turmeric lattes and amazing herbal teas and tinctures, I love them. I'm no longer promoting Dr. Morse's on here. I will share only on this episode because at the moment they don't have affiliations. But if you are working with me and you are on my social media, I love the products, so I highly recommend them anyway. But I don't have a discount code for you guys. I'm so sorry. All right, now I've done this, and I just want to say I'm so excited to get into the episode. Let's go for it. Hi, Brenda. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Chantel. Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me again.
Oh my God, I love to talk to you. You know that, and I can have you here like every week. But for the listeners that were not listening to our conversations, but like I'm like even proposed we should do a show together because it is so much online that is so confusing. And you are like such a voice of reason because you look at things from a very holistic perspective, but also look at science. And we need that. We need more of those voices. And I mean, I know when you came to the Elevate conference online with Dr. Carvalho, he's also like you, very much very level-headed and looks at everything. And what I love about you too is that definitely there is never a sponsorship from industry. So your advices are very much about science and the evidence rather than, well, I'm gonna, there is, I mean, not that every sponsorship is bad because there are some products that are amazing. I'm an affiliate with some of them that I think, okay, they help, but a lot of the times, especially when there's a lot of money included, it becomes a problem. So when it comes to you, I love that, you actually really share what the science says, and then you have common sense and you're like, okay, this is my opinion and this is what the paper says. We have to just look at how things pan out. And so I love that. But before we get into all this, it's going to
I just to respond, Chantal, I've been doing this for about 40 years, and I really and truly believe that when we don't present the actual science, we're undermining our position.
Yes.
It's just so important that we're honest, and being honest about, even if it's not in our favor, helps us to, really recognize potential pitfalls and figure out how we can avert them. This is what we need to do. And for me, it's about more than just human health. It's about the environment. It's about compassion for animals. And so we're doing this for so many reasons. It's just vital we get it right. Because when we get it wrong, we're shooting ourselves in the foot and setting ourselves back 20 or 30 years. So I think integrity and honesty with the science is just, it's just so important.
So important. I know a lot of people know you. Most people, everybody in the plant-based space does. But if we have new listeners, and I hope we do, because I don't want to really preach to the choir. I want to actually have new people that listen to this information. So we definitely share it to demographics that never hear about the benefits of plant-based, that are really maybe even in the opposite camp of carnivore and going for the trends and actually not really understanding how they're even impacting their health long term. So if they don't know you, can we just give them a summary? And I will also link the episodes we've done before, because you have done, in our first one, you explained everything about why you got into nutrition, how even you became vegan. And that, that to me was like, actually, that's testament as to, even if you had a bias, you recognized it and you completely pivoted because it made sense and it was honest. So give people a little introduction about you and your work.
Well, I'm a registered dietitian, as many people know, and I was trained in very standard, university that promoted pretty much an omnivorous diet, and I pivoted in the late 1980s because I just recognized the huge connection between our food choices and what was going on with how we were beginning to raise animals for food, the impact on the environment, and of course, the immense impact on human health. And so I just made a transition, and when I did, it was terrifying because I didn't know if there were any other, I'd never met a vegan in my life. I didn't know if there were any other vegan or even vegetarian dietitians on the planet. So it was a time when things, our profession viewed vegetarian and especially vegan diets as risky, if not downright dangerous. And so it was a real journey for me. But I wrote my first book, began it in 1992, released it in 94, and have since written 14 books, actually. 13 have been published. The 14th is now at the publisher, and it's called Plant Powered Seniors. And I co-authored it with Vasanto Molina and a professor from UBC, University of British Columbia, as well, Charlene Black. And so we're excited about this book. And so my career over the last almost 40 years has been about doing what I can to help people get it right where plant-based diets are concerned. And so that's my goal. And I've been speaking, and I've done some research, which has been published on diabetes in the Marshall Islands, and have been a co-author on many peer-reviewed scientific journal articles as well. So that's kind of brief summary. I have 2 children. They are 41 and 38 now, and I've been married for, I think it'll be 48 years this year. So
congrats. Amazing. Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting one of your children, Corey, who is a co-author on your plant-based protein book. And he's such an amazing guy. He's very much about, and he's an environmentalist, and he's one of the very few environmentalists who actually understand diet's impact, because I cannot believe that we still have to really convince the environmentalists to look at diet. It's
it's shocking. It's
shocking. So that was really nice. Yeah, you have amazing children.
Thank you.
I mean, of course, you are amazing. So, we are today talking about women's health, and you and I had a few exchanges about some studies, but also why this is an important topic, and especially when it comes also to protein, because there's a big conversation online as to what our nutritional needs are as we get older. So we're not going to focus on any particular macro or micronutrients, but they will come up in our conversation. However, we're looking at, the needs for us women. And since I'm in my perimenopausal years, which start or in our 30s, our declining hormones start then, and then it gets closer to menopause later on in our late 40s for most people, with the caveat that some people have different timings. And you are already, I believe, postmenopausal, so
absolutely. I'll be 67 next week, so
I can't believe it. You know what? I was actually I'm like, I'm sure she's in her 50s. I'm gonna say that. So you look amazing, and we know why.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, so we can see, like, I know how I feel, and I've been going through things, and I work with women. I hear the same story that comes up, and you have been through the transition. And I think one of the things that definitely is important to understand and acknowledge is that, unfortunately, our guidelines in general are not really curated for us women, particularly. Historically, we've been we looked at as smaller men. And, so if something works for the general male population, it will work for women, just with some tweaks because we're smaller. And that's not actually the case. So things are evolving. And obviously we had also the HRT conversation that went from none to 100, and things get lost in between. So we have to kind of, balance it out. And I thought, yeah, you definitely look at things with that perspective, so it's great to go there. So the first thing I love to go into is, well, what happens in our transitioning time from our mid-30s, when, before then we are like super perky, we have all our hormones in place, and then things start changing, but it's very gradual, so we don't necessarily feel a difference straight away, but we start feeling that something is different, like we react to our food differently. So if we can give a little bit of view of what that transition looks like.
Well, with two phases, perimenopause, that, as you mentioned, begins in our, possibly late 30s, certainly in our 40s. And then we have menopause, which generally happens in our early 50s, but can begin, of course, it's a gradual, as you say, it's a gradual transition from perimenopause to menopause. But what happens, of course, as you mentioned, is our hormones start to change. So especially estrogen and progesterone, they start to, slowly decline. And it affects really pretty much every system in the body. And so we see changes in our metabolism, our body weight, our cholesterol levels, our blood sugar levels, our bone health, our sleep quality. We see, we begin, especially in our late 40s, I would say, to see symptoms of of these changes, like hot flashes, for example. And as we go through menopause, we see, these hormones decline even more sharply, and so we actually start to experience increased risk of bone loss, higher blood cholesterol levels, more insulin resistance, and less blood, more problems with blood glucose control. We see other metabolic shifts, and we need to recognize that. And unfortunately, in our medical system, it isn't often recognized as strongly as it should be. And so it can impact, how we need to be eating.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I absolutely agree 100% about this overview. And I had a conversation with another doctor. I'm actually still trying to figure out if I should post that conversation, because it is quite different, and it focused only about the fact that most people eat very poorly for the majority of our lives, and that is true, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So our transitioning time, it's only made bad or worse because of that lifestyle and diet. But I feel like not acknowledging that things are changing really metabolically, and I know the body's perfect and it adapts, and it should, and it does, but that I feel like saying just that almost scapegoats the just the lifestyle, but also kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's a little bit of accusation on people just not taking care of themselves. And yes, we have to take responsibility, but it is not as black and white, so the gaslighting feeling really doesn't help women. And we get gaslit a lot, especially when we go to the doctors that are basically telling us it's all in our head. And so we have to have that conversation. So obviously you are specifically focused on nutrition and fitness, because actually you are a fitness not only lover, but also I believe you did some courses in fitness, but you're just great. And what is your perspective on the things that change and how we have to adapt our diet? So what are the main things that you see women, especially as we in menopause, we see the shift of composition that starts, that's even more than other things, and physically speaking, our fat just goes into different places. We lose our butt, we gain our belly.
Absolutely. So when estrogen declines, our resting metabolic rate drops, and it's easier to gain weight. And as you mentioned, especially in certain places like around the abdomen. So it means that we need to be a little more intentional about the foods that we're choosing, and we need to focus more on nutrient density and making sure that we're getting enough protein as well, because our muscle can start to diminish and fat start to increase. And so the way I look at it is we want to put a little more focus on the legume family and a little less focus on the concentrated carbohydrates, because we're trying to eat slightly fewer calories for most people, but still get more, the same or more nutrients. So it means nutrient density, and nutrient density is really just about getting the most nutritional value you can for every bite of food you eat. So, a plant-forward diet gives us it certainly gives us an advantage. So diets that are rich in vegetables and fruits and legumes, and then the whole grains we eat, or the grains we eat, we want to be as unprocessed as possible. So, for example, instead of eating, puffed or flaked or ground grains like flours so much, we want to be eating grains more in their whole form. So barley, quinoa. My favorite breakfast cereal is just, I cook a variety of whole grains like kamut. You can do barley, oat groats, farro, sorghum, whatever. Whole grains. I often put a few lentils in with that mix just to boost the protein and the mineral content. And that is the base of my breakfast bowl. and then add in the chia pudding and the berries and the nuts and seeds, instead of eating it with an almond milk, I'll eat it with an unsweetened soy milk to further boost protein. And so I think that's, number one is to enhance nutrient density while slightly reducing calories. And I know for myself, even though I've maintained my physical activity, I need fewer calories than I used to need, which is really frustrating because I like to eat like most people do. And so I've had to, I eat a lot of non-starchy vegetables because I still like eating a lot of food. And then, lots of legumes and smaller amounts of the starchy vegetables and grains generally. And then the other thing is we may also need to think about foods that can sort of ease our symptoms of the hot flashes, the night sweats, the mood shifts, all of that. And foods that are rich in phytoestrogens like soy and even flax seeds, they contain compounds that can mimic estrogen to some extent in the body. And so these foods can actually help reduce symptoms. And there was a study that was done by PCRM. They fed people a low-fat vegan diet plus a half a cup of soybeans a day, and it decreased the risk of significant symptoms of menopause by, I think it was 84 or 85%. So it really can help. And I know for myself, just going through menopause, I had almost no symptoms. I felt warm once in a while. I had that kind of thing, but nothing very significant. I don't remember night sweats at all. I don't think I had any really significant mood shifts. I've always been a pretty happy person, so I didn't notice any of that stuff. And so I feel like I sailed through menopause. But I have to tell you that I probably eat 2 or 3 servings of soy a day. Flax seeds are part of my daily diet, and these things can help. And they can not only help ease hormonal symptoms, but they can actually lower risk of breast cancer and help in other ways as well. And then if I was to mention a third thing that I think we really need to be intentional about is we need to make dietary adjustments. So we need to protect our do what we can to protect our bones, heart, and our metabolism to help prevent chronic diseases. And so, with menopause comes a higher risk of osteoporosis, a higher risk of cardiovascular disease, a higher risk of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. So that means that certain nutrients, so for our bones, calcium, vitamin D, vitamin K, magnesium, become really important. For cardiovascular disease, we want to think about omega-3 fatty acids. For insulin resistance, it just helping to ensure sufficient of all of these nutrients, but all of the micronutrients become very important as well. And so we need a very high quality diet, a diet that's really brimming with antioxidants and phytochemicals. And so we want to counteract the things like inflammation and oxidative stress that are associated with aging. And so I think, perimenopause is really that sort of window of opportunity that provides a chance to begin to shift our diet and lifestyle before the symptoms of menopause start to peak. And so we want to manage, we want to manage things so that we just minimize our symptoms as we go through menopause. And of course, making all of those changes lays a pretty strong foundation for healthier aging over the long term.
Absolutely. You brought up so many things. I'm making notes because it's like there's conversations from every single thing that you shared. First of all, I'm going to go from the last thing you said, because when I was sick and I had type 2 diabetes, I definitely felt all the perimenopausal symptoms. It was incredible. And I don't anymore. I sleep well. Wow. I'm not irritable. My body composition is back to normal. I am not longer having a problem with sugar management. In fact, I even checked my insulin, not only my A1C, and it's perfect. Wow. And that was really going back to basics. And the other thing is, I'm going to give a shout out to Dr. Barnard, because he did bring soy on the map as not something we should fear. Because for the longest time, everybody was freaking out about estrogen in soy, and it's going to give you cancer, and it's going to give man boobs, from a rat study where they were pumped with isolates of amounts that no human will ever have normally. So it was really a good thing that they've done the study, PCRM. And I know actually one of the questions that I wanted to talk about in that study, obviously they did a very low fat. But we also know, and we know protein is very important. I'd like to actually go into that in a moment. But when it comes to fats, what do women want to focus on? We mentioned the omega-3 fatty acids, where if they're not having any animal products, which we want to obviously inspire people not to and rely on plants, what are the best sources for omega-3 fatty acids? And also, do they need to take a supplement if we want to take into account the EPA and DHA, which is not always efficiently translated from ALAs?
Mm-hmm. So, the study that PCRM did with Dr. Barnard and Dr. Kaliova, they had, I think it was 38 women. It was a small study. They put them on a low-fat vegan diet, which is kind of the standard for PCRM. They always do a low-fat vegan diet, around 10% of calories from fat. And they added in a half a cup of soybeans a day. But they didn't compare a low-fat vegan diet to a more moderate fat vegan diet. So we don't know if they would have had the exact same or even better results with a moderate, a diet that included more nuts and seeds and avocados, for example. My own personal opinion is that a more moderate fat diet is actually healthier in the long term. It's healthier for your skin, for your brain, even for cardiovascular health. So I think we need healthy fats. The healthiest fats come from whole foods, like nuts, seeds, avocados. Soy foods are pretty high in fat as well. Those are wonderful sources because they come packaged with fiber and phytochemicals and antioxidants and all of these things that, a lot of vitamins and minerals, compared to concentrated fats and oils, which are pretty much just fat. There may be a little bit of vitamin E or, small amounts of phytochemicals, and sometimes more modest amounts of phytochemicals, as in, extra virgin olive oil, for example. But generally, oils are much less nutrient dense. So while they can play a role in a healthy diet, and they can absolutely be part of a healthy diet, as you're trying to increase nutrient density, as we're going through these, stages of our lives, it makes sense to get our fat from foods that also provide a lot of nutrition. So my own personal preference is to use oils fairly minimally, but I include fairly generously nuts, seeds, avocados, and these kinds of whole, higher fat plant foods. And I think that really helps with many things, including the health of our skin and our eyes and our brains and so forth. And so I wish a lot of the studies that are done using low-fat vegan diets were done side by side with a more moderate, similar, healthful, high nutrient density, moderate fat vegan diet. And I honestly believe that because fats help with the absorption of so many of the nutrients we're trying to optimize, all the fat-soluble vitamins and many phytochemicals and antioxidants that are fat-soluble. We want the absorption of those nutrients optimized, not minimized. And you will reduce absorption of those things on a very low-fat vegan diet. There are some instances where it makes sense to do quite a low-fat diet, but generally I think a moderate fat diet where the fat is coming mainly from whole foods is really our best diet. So I think that's worth being said. And then getting on to omega-3s and the question about omega-3s, in a plant-based diet, we get alpha-linolenic acid, which is sort of the parent omega-3 from flax and chia and hemp seeds and walnuts and a little bit from soy foods. So even greens, about half the fat in most of our greens is omega-3, but they're so low in fat that they're not a huge contributor generally. But the alpha-linolenic acid is less biologically active than EPA, DPA, and DHA, and EPA and DHA being the ones we hear about most often, and the conversion of ALA into those very biologically active omega-3s, the ones we need for our brain and our eyes and so forth, is very inefficient. And so that conversion, it may be 5% for EPA, it may be, 1 or 2% for DHA. It actually declines as we get older. So I think it's not a bad idea for people, if they have access, to do an omega-3 index test and to see where they're at. In general, most vegans have a low omega-3 index, and we're shooting for an index of, I think, at least 6%, hopefully 8% being more ideal. And most people who are on a vegan diet who don't take EPA and DHA are closer to 3 or 4%. And in order to get that boosted to sort of a level of closer to 8% that's more protective against cardiovascular disease and other conditions as well, requires a supplement of EPA and DHA. And some people will say, well, that just proves we need to eat meat and fish and so forth. But it doesn't. Actually, EPA and DHA are not made by fish. They're made by plants in the ocean called microalgae. And this microalgae can be cultured, and we can consume it in a supplement form rather than consuming fish if we prefer not to consume fish. And of course, vegans are in that camp where we prefer not to consume animal products for many reasons. And so if, and I think it's worth saying that fish, if you're choosing an animal product, from an environmental perspective, fish isn't the best idea. But from a health perspective, fish does provide significant advantages over other animal flesh foods. So because of the long-chain omega-3s they provide, especially if they're relatively clean. And of course, fish is only as clean as the water it's swimming in, so it's not easy to get clean fish. So I think that, and what I would recommend is 300 to 500 milligrams of EPA and DHA is kind of a standard recommendation. But I think if your omega-3 index comes back low, you need to shoot for closer to 5 to 1500. And for a lot of people, it's, some 800 to 1000 milligrams a day.
Okay, so and just like we would do with vitamin D, for example, you do it for a period of time and then you go back to the normal.
That's right. Okay. Exactly, and you retest. You retest your omega-3 index and see where you're standing, and then you can, if at 1000 milligrams you get your index up to 8%, then you can probably pull back to 500 milligrams and see if you can maintain your levels on that sort of maintenance dose. That's sort of a reasonable way to approach it.
And what impacts our absorption as we get older?
Oh, well, changes in hormones affect our absorption. Changes in diet affect, when we eat a lot of, I should first, specifically for omega-3s, there's changes in our production of enzymes like delta-6 desaturase, which is responsible for the conversion. And so, we just are less efficient at producing things. We're less efficient at producing hormones. We're less efficient at producing enzymes that we need to make sure we maximize our absorption of nutrients. And so we just get less efficient at everything as the body ages, and we just need to recognize that. And before I forget, I also found a study from 2025, and this one was from China, but it was on dietary interventions and sort of strategies for menopausal health. And it was a review of 42 studies. And they included randomized trials, meta-analysis, the whole 9 yards. But what they found, and in the end what they recommended, was Mediterranean-style diets, because they consistently lower blood pressure and triglycerides and reduce cardiovascular risk. And plant-based whole food diets, rich in whole grains and fruits and vegetables and legumes, and all of that, being the most effective diets for women who are postmenopausal and at risk for all of the associated osteoporosis and cardiovascular disease and so forth. So, and we don't have a lot of studies, but that's a study that adds some weight to the recommendation of plant-based diets during these periods of time.
Yeah, and we do like meta-analysis because at least they do look at different studies altogether, and so they can compare them. Well, actually, this takes me to a very interesting question, because you and I had an episode about your book, Becoming Raw. And in the plant-based community, we have obviously a demographic that is raw, and some of them are women. And right now, I see a demographic of women who are obviously in early or late 30s, so they're still having children, they're healthy, and they haven't gone through these shifts that we are discussing here, but eventually they will. And actually, I can bring up one person that I can think about. She was on my podcast before she actually stopped being raw vegan. I think she introduced eggs to her diet. I don't think it was necessary, but that was her choice. But she, and I didn't really listen to her videos about explaining why, to be honest, so I'm speaking from with assumption. So, but the assumption that why she did it, I wonder though, if somebody really wants to be committed to staying vegan and staying raw, if that's really something important, how can they manage these nutrients that we're just discussing now, and to make sure that they don't actually become deficient, because obviously a raw diet is more restrictive than a cooked diet in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're 100% raw, it's definitely more challenging to meet needs for protein, iron, zinc, and the nutrients that are more concentrated in the legume family, because you tend not to eat as many legumes. I mean, you eat a few, maybe sprouted peas and sprouted lentils and things like that, but they're not as concentrated. So one of my recommendations is to really consider including a small amount of cooked legumes, and I shouldn't even say a small amount, but some cooked legumes in your diet. So having lentil soup or something like that. If you're not doing that, you really need to focus on sprouted, the legumes that can be sprouted, and you can't eat sprouted kidney beans. There are lots of legumes, the large legumes you generally can't eat sprouted because of the concerns that about trypsin inhibitors and lectins and so forth. So you can eat sprouted mung beans and sprouted lentils and a little bit of sprouted chickpeas. But even chickpeas, there's some issue. You don't want to eat too many of them. So it's challenging. I would really focus on seeds for people that are raw, lots of pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds, those kinds of foods. So it ends up being a lot higher fat diet, which to me isn't a problem. You just need to make sure you're getting those nutritional needs met, and seeds can really, really help. Mm. And then, protein is an issue too. So we need to recognize that as we get older, as we go through menopause, that natural decline in estrogen that increases visceral fat mass, or the fat in and around our vital organs, that increases. We see decreased bone mineral density, but we also see declining muscle mass and declining strength as we get older. And so, protein intakes become, physical activity, of course, is paramount. We've got to do some resistance training, but we also need to get enough protein. And protein is, an issue as we get older, because we're eating fewer calories. We tend to be eating fewer calories. And so we need to make sure that in those calories we're meeting our protein needs so that we don't accelerate the loss of muscle mass and strength, because that is really bad news as we get older, can lead to sarcopenia and frailty and so forth. So protein is definitely a significant consideration.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you said something that I'm going to ask you your opinion about. Because we need to have more protein to support our muscle mass, and that is not just by sitting on a couch. We have to work out, we have to move our body, we have to add resistance. So even women that don't like the gym, they need to get to the gym, because that's really the place you're going to be challenged to lift, right? You're not going to be doing it at your home. Like, that's just human nature. We don't push if we don't have to. But in the especially in the they call it the menopause. So
can I just, there's some people that live in areas where there are no gyms.
That is true.
They're in small communities, they're in a cabin somewhere. And one of the things that I've found to be really, really helpful is to do these classes online. And so there are strength training classes online that really help with motivation. And so if you just have some, 5, 8, 10-pound weights available and you do these classes, you can get a really comparable workout to what you'd get at the gym, because there's a lot of reps and you're pushing yourself maybe a little harder than you would just on your own. So that's one way of kind of overcoming if there is no access to a gym.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I misspoke, because I did include in the gym category in my mind. Not very well translated. That actually online classes are also beneficial. Yes. Absolutely. And also for people that don't actually like to go to the gym, but that is a gym to me. Like you have a teacher in front of you, somebody's pushing you. You have inspiration. So definitely, yeah, online or offline gym or in-person gyms, just get into a program. And the other thing is obviously the menopause. So they call themselves the women and the doctors that have been looking at menopause deeply, perimenopause, and they are also the ones that are looking at the studies that kind of remediate a little bit what the Women Health Initiative shared. To be fair, it wasn't even the study that shared the fear; it was the media that shared the fear before the study was even peer reviewed. So it just stuck. The whole thing, like, HRT is bad for you, we don't take it, nobody takes it, everybody has to just not have estrogen. Even though we take we take a contraceptive pill that I think is probably worse in many ways, because we are on it for many years and there are risks that are not even divulged to the people that are taking it. We just give it freely like candy right now. So it's a little bit of a hypocritical approach, but they are pushing having 30 grams of protein, and they definitely do not love plants. They always talking about animal protein to be given to women 3-4 times a day. So that's quite a large amount of protein to begin with, which I think we need to probably also, yes, we want to have more and we want to keep a stable amount to maintain our muscle mass and to also to help our metabolic health. But we also have to take into consideration what it does for our kidneys. And also, does it need to really be from animal products? We know it's not, but they push it that way. And although I appreciate that they also talk about inserting and having a lot of plants because of the fiber, which is very important. This narrative of pushing protein from animal products is still quite valid. I see it, or prevalent. I see it everywhere. And so I feel like there's not a very balanced approach. So how do we actually speak to women that are listening to these conversations and then they're like, oh God, okay, I have to have, this stuff because
protein,
I need 30 grams.
No, this is such an important conversation. And fortunately, we actually have enough studies that have shown conclusively that MPS, or muscle protein synthesis rates, don't differ between plant and animal protein if we get enough protein. And so there was actually a study from 2025 that looked at a well-balanced vegan diet compared to a mixed diet in older adults and looked at muscle protein synthesis rates, and they did not differ between the vegans and the omnivores. And so, but the difference that they did find was the people that were getting their protein from plants actually had, better total cholesterols. They had, reduction in LDL cholesterol, reduction in total cholesterol. And so it provided an advantage over getting our protein from animal foods. And in fact, there's several studies looking at, I think we might talk about sarcopenia later, but showing that there's an advantage with plant protein. And then we've got several studies on looking at younger people, and especially young men, doing resistance training and comparing plant protein sources versus a mixed diet, and that have shown absolutely no difference if you're getting sufficient protein in muscle protein synthesis. So I think, we need to recognize that. And we do need probably a little more protein as we get older. And so I generally recommend, some 1 to 1.2 or even 1.3 grams per kilogram per day. The RDA in North America is 0.8. I think it's 0.83 in many other places. In some countries, like the Nordic countries, there are separate recommendations for older people. There aren't in North America, but most experts are now saying at least 1 to 1.2 and maybe 1.3 for plant-based eaters to allow, to compensate for the slightly lower digestibility of plant protein. So I think that the question sort of arises, can we really get enough from plants? And a very plant-based diet provides all essential amino acids. But animal products are not biologically required, and this is what a lot of people don't understand. All essential amino acids originate from plants or microorganisms, not animals. And so it makes no sense to think we can't get them from plants. It's where they come from. Plants are capable of making all 9 essential amino acids. Some plants are a little higher in one than the other, and so by eating a variety and getting enough calories, we tend to get plenty of all of those essential amino acids that we need. And one of the things that I think we do need to recognize is that as we get older and we start eating fewer calories, if we're eating a truly whole food plant-based diet, so vegetables, fruits, legumes, some nuts and seeds, some whole grains, we may not get enough protein. And so we need to focus more on protein-rich foods. And I've had a number of clients who come in at 35 to 45 grams of protein a day when you need to be getting closer to 1.1, 1 or 1.3, somewhere in that range, which would probably be closer to 55 to 65 grams of protein a day. And so and a lot of people think, boy, that's going to be hard to increase from 35 or 45 to 55 or 65. It's actually not that hard at all. So, switch from almond to soy milk and add some tofu to your salad and you're pretty much there. So
I was going to say,
really not hard. It's not hard. And so you just need to think about, if you're having a snack, that it's a snack with protein. If you're having an apple, there's some nut butter with it or something like that. But always be thinking at every meal, what is my source of protein for this meal? So I do strive for about 20 grams of protein per meal. And so at breakfast, I get some from my intact grains, I get some from my hemp seeds, I get some from my soy milk, but it adds up to about 20 grams in the meal. And so, just for people who, think, well, I've heard so many plant-based doctors say they've never seen a case of protein deficiency or case of protein inadequacy. Everybody gets enough protein if they eat enough calories from plant foods. And I would say I beg to differ. I've seen lots of people with, especially older women, with insufficient protein in their diet. And what we see is we see a loss of muscle mass and strength, or sarcopenia. We see fatigue. We see reduced stamina. We see sort of slow recovery from illness and injury. One of the things we often see is fragile skin that breaks and bruises easily. We see our hair thinning. We see very brittle nails. Immune system gets compromised. Difficulty fighting infections. We see edema sometimes. We see mood changes. So there are lots of things that we see, and you know, insufficient protein is really quite common in senior women who are not eating very many calories. And so their diet needs to focus a little more on the legume and sort of seed kind of category of foods. And so we just need to take care of it. And it's not a difficult thing to do. It means eating meals with a source of protein, aiming for at least, you know, around 20 grams per meal, maybe a little more for some people, including legumes, and soy foods are super, super helpful because they're more concentrated in protein. Switching from low protein non-dairy milks to, you know, unsweetened soy milk. And then the other thing I would suggest is just to consider adding some more highly digestible sources of protein. Tofu then that means sources that are a little lower in fiber. So tofu and soy milk and peanut butter and even pureeing, like pureed bean soups and lentil soups and things like that, where, you know, the surface area of the food is greater, the absorption is enhanced, actually so significantly that it's in the 90+% range. The other thing that people can include is a little bit of a protein powder or veggie meat. And I know some people will be shocked to say I would recommend those highly processed foods, but for some people, they can make such a difference in meeting nutritional requirements in a way that's easy, accessible, convenient. And so they can really make a difference to getting to where you need to be, and they can be quite enjoyable. The one thing that I would suggest is you compare labels, choose those that are a little lower in sodium, a little lower in saturated fat, and contain more whole foods if that's an option. So those are just some tips for getting to where we need with protein.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think there are some things you brought on that I think it's worth commenting on, which is when, you know, all the effects of not having enough protein. I think we haven't been highlighting those things in the past because people look at that as a normal process of aging. So expecting women to become frail, to become, and not just women, but we're focusing on women here, to become frail, to become less mobile, to become more fragile, and that is really not the case. I mean, you are a testament when you know, again, you said your age, so I'm not being unpolite for sharing that you are in your late 60s and you are extremely muscly and you are strong. And we have Chef Babette, who is in her 70s, and she's kicking it, you know, like.
Yes, and my writing partner Vasanta will be 84 in a couple of months, and she's just doing amazingly well with all of her fitness. And the other co-author, Charlene, is in her 70s, and again, super physically fit. I think of, you know, when I go to Loma Linda for conferences and so forth, this is one of the blue zones in California, and I see the seniors there that are in their 90s often, who are walking so briskly and looking so fit. It just is such an inspiration to me. My mom is 88, and she does, you know, fitness pretty much every day. She is involved in a curling league. She does water exercises twice a week, dance exercises twice a week. She does yoga twice a week. And so she, you know, she's maintained her fitness so beautifully. And this is possible. Mm-hmm. We need to recognize this is possible. if we live like a sort of a blue zone person where we're, eating a varied, healthy, a plant predominant or plant exclusive diet, and we're being physically active, we're prioritizing social connection and sleep and avoidance of addictive substances and stress management and all of the other pillars of lifestyle medicine. Living a healthy lifestyle is just so critical. So, yeah.
This is a perfect example where, I'm going to say anecdotal with the concept that actually it's been studied too, but in a way, this is more epidemiological study. Like we see the behavior of some people within a civilization. And unfortunately, because most of the population is not healthy because of the choices that they are not aware that they could make, we are just assuming that decline is inevitable and that that's what's going to happen for everybody, when ultimately the truth is we move through our choices. Our body responds to our choices, and we should take those people that we mentioned, including yourself, that are perfect examples of how strong and healthy and fit we can be even when we get older, and actually show that it's not it's just, she's an outlier. The outliers is how we should be. The general population is what we have become because of circumstances. I mean, I listened to my friend Dr. Will Baltovitz. He was talking about how he actually is quite upset with the general input of government, guidelines when it comes to nutrition. We always use Canada as such a good place to start, like how, and you were involved, you and Besanto were involved into the making of it. Industry was not involved. And you can see the balance of it, actually really highlighting the importance of protein from plants and how more vegetables and fruit and whole grains versus what's happening now in the US, for example, and everywhere, even in Europe. But he's like, let's not listen to those guidelines. Let's go actually back to the things that have always helped us. And our microbiome focuses on gut, of course. And what is really supporting the microbiome is plants. So we need to really step away from the influencer space that is also infiltrated our governments and actually really look at the science and look at civilizations that live long and live well and what they consume. And this also goes to a lot of people are like, well, we get older, so we consume less protein because our hydrochloric acid amounts in our stomach decreases, so it's harder to digest. But I really somehow believe this, and of course it's my belief, and I don't have studies in front of me about this, that is also because we are kind of pushing our body with these animal products all the time. And if we go plants, our body is perfectly catered to breaking down the amino acids or the protein into amino acids from the plants, because that's how we're designed to be. So I feel that that's not going to be a conversation where like, oh, we're going to struggle, having like enough hydrochloric acid to break down the protein. I don't think that happens with plants. So, but we have to have enough. So it's about the amounts and obviously curating it. Like for me, my intake of protein goes up to 1.6 almost, because I'm really, really active and I do a lot of exercise. So I need more protein. But I also for plants, so I don't, I don't see any. I mean, I need to. In the summer, I was a bit dehydrated. I needed to drink more. So I was like, okay, because when you have more protein, you actually do have to hydrate more, even from plants. But generally, because of tofu being my thing, like I'm high raw, but tofu, I'm not going to take it out. It's a quick win for me. So
yeah.
So definitely those things are like, they are nuisances we have to talk about. And online.
Yes, and that's so amazing. And I really appreciate your mentioning slightly higher protein intakes needed for very physically active individuals, and especially for individuals who are trying to gain muscle. Then we're looking at intakes of closer to 1.5 or 1.6 grams per kilogram per day. And for a lot of people, that's not that easy to achieve. But like you're showing that it's possible, especially by including more of those concentrated soy foods like tofu. And one of the things that I love to make at home is tempeh. And I was one of those people that was I wasn't very keen on tempeh because I had only tried store-bought tempeh, and it has an off flavor often to me.
Yeah.
And then one time I was at a friend's place that had made tempeh, and it was absolutely delicious. And I thought, what is different here? But I decided to learn how to make tempeh and invest in tempeh starter, and it's a super simple process. And now I pretty much always have homemade tempeh on hand, which is a very much a fermented whole soy food. So you're getting that, the wonderful fermented food into your diet, but also getting the whole soybeans, which are really amazing too.
Totally. Yeah. I've started making sometimes my own soy milk as well to have a little bit more protein in it. So because I can
Yes.
find organic soybeans. And then there is a company here in Portugal that is very local to where I am, where they started making tempeh from different beans as well. So they do the chickpea
Yes.
one, they do the black beans
Black
one,
bean.
and they're
Yeah.
really good. I'm like, why are we not having these in the stores? They are amazing,
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, perfect. I think I want to ask you one more thing, and then I know you have to go to the gym, but we'll carry on the conversation on another thing for tomorrow. But what about supplements for women? Magnesium comes up a lot. B complex comes up a lot as well. What is your take on that?
Well, I really appreciate the question, because a lot of people think if I'm taking supplements, it's just kind of proving that, that the diet isn't adequate. And nothing can be further from the truth. If you think about standard omnivorous diets, we've been fortifying the food supply with vitamin D and iron and folate or folic acid in many cases, and adding things to foods. We add iodine to salt to help ensure nutritional adequacy of an omnivorous diet. And it's no different for plant-based diets. It's different nutrients that we need to be concerned about sometimes, but there are commonly nutrition shortfalls, and so I think there's a number of supplements that are worth considering. Vitamin B12 is non-negotiable. We have to have a source in our diet. A lack of B12 damages our nervous system. It causes anemia. It can increase our risk of cardiovascular disease. It boosts homocysteine levels. So it's just not a negotiable. We have to have a source. And the most reliable source is a supplement. We can certainly get some from fortified foods, but generally the amounts may not be sufficient to meet our requirements. So what we need, I would say, is at least 1,000 micrograms 2 or 3 times a week. If you're under 65, if you're over 65, many experts are suggesting about 500 micrograms a day. Cyanocobalamin is often recommended because it's stable and it's cheap. Methylcobalamin is also certainly a good option, but it's more expensive and less stable. And so many experts will suggest 1,000 micrograms a day if you're doing methylcobalamin. And then vitamin D is another one that vegans have fewer plant sources of vitamin D. So we have mushrooms, we have some fortified foods, but the mushrooms have to be grown in UV light to be good sources, or they can be exposed after we purchase them to UV light. But generally, I think most people, I live in Canada, so we don't produce vitamin D from sunshine in Canada for probably at least 6 to 8 months during the year. And so, or maybe even more in some parts of Canada. So we need to take a supplement. And so what I would recommend is probably 2,000 IUs a day. You can test if possible. It's good to know where you're at, and then you can adjust based on where you're at. I mean, if your levels are less than 30 nanograms per mil or 75 nanomoles per liter, then then you need more. And so some people may need 4,000 IUs a day. Some may need only 1,000 if they get good sunshine exposure, but generally we need some vitamin D. Calcium is one that I think is more, not something that we necessarily need to supplement. The approach that I take with calcium is food first. So we want to get the RDA from food if we can. And so for women over 50 in North America, the RDA is 1,200 milligrams. I know it's less in some European countries, but I aim for 1,200. And if you're lower than that, you can make up, get to your RDA with a supplement. But if you're supplementing, you don't probably want to do more than 500 milligrams, and you want to divide it into 2 doses. You want to avoid excessive supplementation. So I would suggest not going much over 1,500 milligrams from food plus pills, because there's a possibility it could increase hardening of the arteries and your cardiovascular risk. So the upper limit for women 50 plus is 2,000 milligrams, but we just need to be aware that we don't want to overdo it. Just the vascular sort of calcification and even kidney stone risk can increase with a lot of supplemental calcium. So that one's, be cautious. I think it's a really wise idea to use a fortified soy milk to boost intake with food for people that are really trying to get to the RDA and are having a difficult time doing that. And then other nutrients that we really need to think about are iodine, and this iodine is critical for thyroid hormone production, and that impacts metabolism, energy, mood, all of those things. It's also critical for cognition, which we're talking processing speed and memory and just attention span and those kinds of things. And so again, risk can be higher in vegans because key sources, in an omnivorous diet, we think of fish and dairy products that have iodine from, iodine that's used to clean the teats of cows, for example. But in a vegan diet, unless you're a regular consumer of seaweed, you're probably not meeting the RDA. So having a supplement is a wise idea. And I mean, you can get enough from iodized salt, but generally we're trying to avoid excessive salt intake. So and again, we need to be really conscious that excess. So if you exceed the upper limit, and in North America that is 1,100 micrograms, it can also harm your thyroid function. And you can get above the upper limit so easily with seaweed, so especially kelp. So you get your 150 micrograms, which is your daily requirement, with like a 1/16 of a teaspoon. So imagine if you're eating a whole teaspoon, you're above the upper limit. So you just need to be conscious and look up, how much you're getting from your seaweed so you don't exceed that upper limit. Now, if you're getting some iodine through eating nori, you don't really have to worry about exceeding the upper limit because it's much lower in iodine than kelp or, some of the other seaweeds. And then the other one that I think, maybe two that might be worth considering. One is EPA and DHA, and we talked about that already. Mm-hmm. But for people with a low omega-3 index, probably somewhere 500 to 1,500 milligrams a day. And then the other one that sometimes comes up is magnesium. Yeah. And magnesium may increase under stress if you're getting inadequate sleep, and they can increase with aging as well. And so here you're looking at a supplement of glycinate or citrate because they have higher bioavailability and they're easier on digestion, and probably 100 to 200 milligrams a day if your diet is a bit low is sufficient. The upper limit from supplements is actually 350 milligrams per day for women 50 plus. So that's just something to be aware of. If you get too much, you may get diarrhea, especially from magnesium oxide or citrate. And we did, suggest citrate being a good choice generally. So you just don't want very high doses of magnesium. But I think that's probably, covers and you can do a multivite as well if you want to boost sort of zinc and some of the other trace minerals and such.
Yeah. About the magnesium, what is your thought about, because there are about 12 kinds. What is your thought on these companies that put different kind of magnesiums together? Do you advise them, or do you think it's better just to stay with the ones you have mentioned?
The glycinated citrate, to be honest, I haven't seen good research on that, but maybe something I need to look into. I'm guessing the combinations are probably a reasonable choice. But again, the quantity is, you just want to be careful not to exceed the 350 milligrams in supplements. Yeah. It's fine from food, that's not an issue. But 350 from supplements is your upper limit.
And I must say, I didn't mention calcium in my list because I also, like you, I just read some research that shows how it can actually be deterrent for our arterial health. But I think from food we can get more than enough. So just so that people know where to get it from, what kind of food should they have to get enough calcium?
Yeah, so the best plant sources of calcium are low oxalate leafy greens. So the greens that are high in oxalates are spinach, Swiss chard, and beet greens. And so even those greens have a lot of calcium in them because they're so high in oxalates, you just don't absorb much of it. You might absorb 5% or 10% at most. But in low oxalate greens, so we're talking about things like kale and broccoli and turnip greens and a lot of the Chinese greens, you'll absorb probably 40 to 70% of the calcium there because they're low in oxalates. So those are wonderful sources. And then other sources, legumes are reasonable sources. Some nuts and seeds like almonds and chia seeds are remarkably high in calcium. So chia seeds are a wonderful source. You can, make a chia pudding or grind chia seeds and use them in things. So that's another option. And then, even you get a little bit from things like dried figs and oranges, but the other source, of course, is fortified non-dairy milks, which provide about the same amount in North America. It's about 300 milligrams per cup. I think it might be similar in Europe, but the fortified non-dairy beverages can really help to easily boost intakes if you have a difficult time getting to where you need to be just with food alone. Yeah. With whole foods alone.
I will have to say that testing is always great, not necessarily about calcium, but in general, because when I tested my B vitamin, I didn't realize that there was B12 in my nutritional yeast. And that was so high. I was like, oh my gosh, I had to stop the supplements. Wow. I know. I was
like, interesting. Too much B12. And that happens to a lot of vegans where they're taking a supplement, they're using nutritional yeast, they're drinking fortified non-dairy milks, they're eating cereals with B12, and they can actually end up with fairly high levels in their blood. So we definitely need to be very aware of B12 because insufficient intakes are really, really not good. But we can also get too much.
Yes. I need to ask you just one last question. I'm aware of time, so we have 4 minutes. There is something going around the internet right now about B12 and how it's a conspiracy and that we shouldn't take the supplements. And I don't know if you've seen it. This is maybe a conversation we can have another time because, as I said, we really need to do that show. It's crazy what's out there. But
that's scary. That's just scary to me. It is. It is, it almost brings me to tears because when you have a young mother who believes something like that and has a baby, she's got a newborn baby, that baby can have irreversible brain damage within a few months from B12 deficiency. B12 is a nutrient that is absolutely necessary for our nervous system function, our brain function, red blood cell formation. It's and plants are not reliable sources. I mean, if they're contaminated with manure that has some B12 on it, they might have a little bit, but usually we clean our food so we don't be exposed to pathogenic organisms, and so the B12 would be gone, and to ignore the need for B12 and to say we don't have to worry about it. I've seen people who have developed irreversible neurological damage from B12 deficiency. I've seen babies die from B12 deficiency. And to me, one case of B12 deficiency is one too many. We need to recognize this is an essential nutrient without which you can die. So that's the bottom line.
Thank you. I love that. And I think I'm going to put this also in the show notes as a statement because it is really important. And I think we probably will have to bring it up in every episode now because, seeing people sharing books about it, I'm just like, I mean, everybody can write a book now. It doesn't necessarily peer-reviewed either. It's not that it's a research, but you want to be accurate. You want to have references in there. And just because we really live in a world where if you are conspiratorial, you get a lot of attention. And I mean, I don't believe everything about the system. I'm very aware that there's a lot of corruption, but I also want to keep a level head. And I'm like, okay, but I want to see people do well. And even if it was, even if in another space we didn't prove that B12 is not damaging to take it. And so just avoid having the deficiency and, be at peace with your life. Like, don't do stupid things,
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. This is not, like I said, to me, it's just non-negotiable. We need to, if we are to further, plant this sort of our concept of a kinder, more compassionate, plant-based world, we need to make sure we do well, because every failed vegan is exhibit number one for why people are justified eating meat and animal products. So we need to get this right, and getting it right means making sure we don't develop severe nutritional deficiencies that compromise our health and longevity. We need to have healthy, vegans that are healthy at 100 to sort of prove to the world that this not only works but is really preferable for everybody, for animals, for the environment, but also for people. And we
want to make the blue zone the blue planet, which we're supposed to be. Thank you so much, Brenda. So nice to chat to you, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. Very clear information. I think it's going to help a lot of people just to clarify and be less anxious about our progression into menopause, which will be a beautiful, time of our lives. I mean, as you show, you are active, you are energized, you're healthy, and this is exactly what we need to thrive for.
Well, thank you so much, Chantal, and thank you so much for what you're doing to educate the world. It's really a privilege to be with you.
Thank you. Likewise. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Brenda. This was an incredible episode. And I want to say, everybody, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot. And if you have questions, send them to me, because Brenda and I can actually still answer you. We will do it through social media. We have an Instagram account for the Wellness Woman. So you can actually send me the questions to any episode and I can get you the answers that you need. At the same time, I also want to say Brenda and I are considering actually doing a little project to really help with a bit of clearing of some misinformation that is online. So we'll keep you posted on that, because she is amazing, and we can invite some other awesome speakers and scientists to share what is extremely confusing online, from B12 to glucose spikes to vegetable oils. And I know a lot of my wonderful colleagues are covering this, but I honestly feel like we cannot stop talking about it, especially in view of the new guidelines for nutrition that have come out in the US, which are going to really confuse people, and I fear what's going to happen there. But I have Brenda back next week, and we are talking again about the guidelines, and she brings such a steady, level-headed approach to this view, especially with her experience writing the Canadian ones. So I look forward to that one. As always, if you liked it, please do share, comment, make sure that you support us on the channels that we are sharing this on, because that's the only way I can grow and invite more amazing people. See you soon. Bye.